It still sounded like it was hitting, and I thought, what is going on? And the gap here was tight. This hinge was pushed in all the way, and I adjusted, I pulled it out a little bit to match. The top was already like that. Okay, that's the type of gap you want on the side, between the edge of the cabinet, back of the door, and the front face of the actual cabinet, about like that. This was pushed in all the way. That's one way to adjust that, is I unscrewed this back screw, and then just a little bit, and then I pulled this cabinet door out a little bit, tightened up the screw, and now it works fine on that. But that didn't get it any closer. That didn't get this gap closer, did it? Well, that's what the next screw is for, and that's what I'm going to show you. This screw right there. If you screw it in or out, the door, that puts the angle of this hinge out, which then pulls the door closer. See, the gap still is like that. So you've got to do this, and first you have to determine which way to go. See, if I go it that way, it looks like this hinge section is going close over there. Now this gap will be bigger. See how big that gap is? So when I tighten that screw, I think I have to tighten it, yeah. The door comes over further, and there's only so far I can go with that, okay? I can only go that far. Now look at the gap. That gap is a lot closer there, isn't it? But now the gap up at the top is bigger. That's because I can take that one up there, and I'm going to push that over as far as I can go. And I'm going to do that next. I'm going to set this down. I've got my camera on a tripod. Okay. Get my little stool here. So now I can take my Phillips screwdriver, and I'm going to put it on the top one and tighten that down. And that's pulling this hinge out this way. So it's taking this door here and it's moving it to the left. Now look at this gap. Look at the gap now. See that? It's just barely too much. Okay? So that tells me I got to back off it just a hair. I got to get back up here, and I've got it adjusted all the way out. Okay? And that was like tightening the screw, so I'm going to back the screw off. Just a wee bit. I'm going to look at it, and that looks pretty good. I'm going to see if I can't get it a little bit more. Okay. And that's looking nicer. You see there? The gap is nice. It's not going to rub. Now I got the same gap up at the top. Okay. Now see that gap? That's about how much of a gap I want. See this next set of doors? I can simply do the same thing here. And I always kind of check on the outside here first. This is almost flush. The edge of the door is almost flush. And right here, it's sticking in just a bit. And I can look at this gap here in between. I see that gap. I look at the top gap. See how much bigger the top gap is? Well, what am I gonna do there? Sometimes you just have to do the best you can looking at what can happen. Okay, so when I look at this, the bottom gap is just a hair bigger than the top gap. And I know if I move this that way a little bit, I'll have the same reveal on this finished edge as I will up here. See how it's sticking out further, the edge of the cabinet there, than the bottom? Okay, so I know the first thing I can do is take this cabinet hinge right here and see if I can remember which way to do this. Yeah, I'm tightening it up. And I can already see this is moving this way, just a hair. Okay, so that's the first thing I can do. And then I look at this edge over here, and You see? Now I've got a little bit of a gap there, don't I? Just that matches up over there. That's what you're gonna see. Okay? And that moved it over closer, didn't it? Now, if I wanted to move this particular cabinet door over further, I would have to move it all the same right here. A little bit at the bottom, a little bit at the top. Okay? Or I can look up there and see, what do I have to do? I know this one here, I really don't want to move to the left because then it's going to make that gap bigger, right? So I look over here and I see the gap between the two cabinets. Remember, this is a separate cabinet, this is a separate cabinet. So we know the hinges are here and the hinges are here. When I open that door, you see where the hinges are, okay? So I know I can move the top over a little bit and create just a slight bit more gap there. So that's the next thing I'm gonna do. It's just a process of elimination is what it is, okay? And so I'm gonna move this, which means I'm tightening this, and I can feel it's moving this way a little bit. So because I did the top, I gotta do the bottom now. About the same. And now I'm gonna check that for the gap. Let's get you in there closer. Oh, that's pretty. See that? Now look up at the top. It's about the same, isn't it? See, now I increase the gap right there because I moved the top of the cabinet over. See the nice gap between the two cabinet doors now? Between those two, it's just about the same now, isn't it? It looks better. And because I moved the top, I had to move the bottom. So now I've got a bigger edge right there that matches up with that. This lines up. Now, if you had everything lined up at this point, let's say this door was lower by 1/8 of an inch, 1/4 of an inch, let's say, than this one, no matter what you do, there's no way you're gonna line those up. And that's gonna mean, what is that gonna mean? Let's say, for instance, this door is down 1/8 of an inch lower than that. What would that mean? That would mean you'd have to get in here. And here's another adjustment you can do on these doors. These two screws, these are your mounting screws, yes, but if you loosen those up, you can see that there's a slight little gap up there. You see that gap down there? Right there. That means if this cabinet was sticking down, that means you would have no gap up there, and that would mean you'd have to loosen these two screws, and you'd have to go up there and loosen the same two screws up there and that, and then you would take the whole cabinet door and you'd lift up on it, push up on it, until this thing has adjustment, a slide right there, okay? It's to where when you put the screw in, you tighten it down, it's not gonna move. But once you loosen it up, you can push the door up and then retighten the screws on that one and this one, and that would raise that up. If that cabinet door was too high, let's say this cabinet door you thought was too high, okay? You would do the same thing, you'd let that drop. But if this is dropped all the way down and you're like, oh, I can't move this door down any further. Well, maybe that means you have to look at this one and you have to loosen up the hinges, those mounting screws over here to push this cabinet door up. And maybe this one you have to push down, or maybe this one's down all the way and you have to lift this one up, okay? Because the other one couldn't be adjusted, okay? So that's another way to make adjustments. And I always try to look at the edges and stuff and try to go to the finished edges and check that out, okay? And then make my adjustments. So you see all the adjustments you got on this thing? And here's something else. If you close the door and one door seems to not be closing all the way, let's say it's not closing all the way at the top, but at the bottom you think it's closing, but at the top it's not. It might not be a warped door. It might be that this is too close. And so you would loosen that one screw right there, right? Back in there, okay? And you could pull this one out a little bit further and then retighten it. And then you could loosen up the same screw up there and push the top of the door here in a little bit. And then you see how that would keep this door, instead of being rocked this way, it's now going to lessen like this. Now you can close the door further at the bottom, which then is going to make the top closer in, and then that's going to line up. You may have to adjust that on the other door too or something, or if you have a warped door, that's how you can fix it. You can mimic one unwarped door to kind of line up with a warped door to a certain extent. At least you can make it better. I've done that before. Okay, so there's another adjustment you can do. Well, that's all I got for this time, but I'll be back with more videos.